What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright, soldiers, welcome back to another deck breakdown, and it is in the form of Forcecraft this time. And the one cool thing that is cool about this is that it's actually in a different universe. So when we're in the collab universes, which we are in right now with Shadowverse Evolve and Vanguard, you don't really have to apply to the same rules as all the other decks. But of course, before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, I do want to let everybody know that I am going to be at BSF Philly this year. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to be like having as an event. I was there last year, so I'm very excited to see everybody there. Some people may recognize me from, our actual webcam locals and stuff like that, but I'm just really excited to see, just Bushy Road celebrating something on the East Coast because we really don't get that many events over here. So I'm hoping in the future we can get some more events so I can participate. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start another Forcecraft breakdown. Alright, so if you haven't been living under a rock, Aqua Force is going to be in the form of Forcecraft for this collab set. It's a very interesting deck that kind of uses the traits from regular Forcecraft and throws them into the Vanguard, which is actually pretty cool because the whole thing about Forcecraft is you want to do combo 3. You want to make sure you're playing at least 2 cards before you play that third card before you can get that effect, which is a very cool mechanic of Forcecraft. But the cool thing about Aqua Force is you're going to be swinging with at least 3 followers in one turn, which is very cool because you're going to be using other followers' effects to play other followers, and then those cheap followers that you do play are either going to be able to swing into leader this turn or swing into an enemy follower. So I would say Aqua Force is a force to be reckoned with. So if you are not very prepared for this deck will definitely get under your feet very quickly. And if they're actually able to hit some certain triggers in their deck, then their deck can hit like gas very fast. But of course, before we get into the deck, let's talk about the pros and cons. So the pros for the deck go in Storm, big turns, cheap followers, while on the cons we have hand size, small followers, trigger dependent, and it has small removal. Alright, so starting off with the first pro, we have Storm. So one cool thing that we really do like is when we're able to play something and then use it the very same turn. So being able to swing with these followers is very helpful, and on the fact that this really will count to the, hey, if you've swung with X amount of Aqua Force followers, which, a minimum has to be 3 sometimes, and sometimes it has to be a minimum of 2. So it's pretty cool that you're able to play these followers and being able to swing into leader the very same turn. So another thing to note, of course, we're going to be swinging with followers the same turn that we play them. So that means we're going to be making big turns out of really small followers, which is of course the last point there. But of course, we're going to have big turns. So we're going to need a lot of play points to being able to play a whole bunch of followers in one turn. And then at the same time, of course, with the mechanic of effects, we're going to need to at least have one follower on the field to either swing into something, replace itself, or at least get some value when swinging, and then playing another follower which will have either fanfare effects or strike effects. So it'll be like, hey, I can play X amount of followers or something like that. So there's going to be a lot of sequencing of plays. So I think big turns here is just a lot of sequencing, and you're going to have to do things correctly for you to get the max amount of like output of damage. Alright, and then lastly we have cheap followers. So of course these followers are not very big and their costs are low, so that means that their stats are low, which was one of the cons that we have on the right here. But having the cheap followers means that we're able to swing with those 3 followers pretty quickly, and then we can get those effects going on. Alright, so looking at the con of things, so we have hand size. So of course, if we're going to be playing a whole bunch of cheap followers pretty fast, we're going to have to sacrifice something, and that is unfortunately going to be in the form of our hand. So you're not going to have a very big hand size, especially when you go for a big play, and if you swing with 3 Aqua Force followers, your hand size is probably going to be very abysmal. And another hard point to point out for this deck is that these followers are very small. Sometimes I think the average defense of every follower is like 3 or less. So it's very hard if your opponent's going to be playing a very responsive deck and you try and go in for at least like a pretty good play, and then you keep getting interrupted because your followers aren't very big. So very control heavy decks that are just waiting to play on your turn can really, you know, screw you over. All right, I won't say that the deck is 100% trigger dependent, but I will say if you want to get the max amount of your plays, or, you know, hit certain things, I think the deck really needs to hit triggers to really get it going. I won't say it's like trigger reliant for the engine to work, but if you really want to try and win the game in a very good pace, I will say that the triggers make it very helpful and really put it into its position. Alright, and lastly, we have small removal. So there's not that much removal for this deck. Of course, we're going to have rush followers where we're going to trade in with other followers, which sometimes is very helpful so we can get that board space. So we're able to, you know, get those 3 Aqua Force follower swings in one turn. But you got to realize these followers are small followers, so they're not swinging for a lot as well. So there are those predicaments where there's a 5/5 follower and you're like, okay, well, I can't deal 5 in any way, so I'm going to have to sacrifice, you know, maybe like 2 followers, which is a huge neg. Alright, so we have our Aqua attackers. So these are the cool followers that you're really going to want to be focusing on in terms of storm damage and like getting the most out of your deck. I think these are going to be the core cards that you're going to really want to look at when building Aqua Force. Alright, so looking at the Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, so it's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve for 4 into the Supreme Dragon. It has Storm and 2 and Drive, so it drive checks twice, but it has a cool strike ability. So if it's the 4th time an Aqua Force follower on your field has attacked this turn, you can evolve this follower into a Blue Supreme Dragon Glory Maelstrom, so in the evolved form. And looking at the evolved form, so it turns into a 4/4 and it still has Storm and Twin Drive. So whenever this follower deals damage to an enemy leader, you select enemy follower on the field and destroy it, and then draw 2 cards. So this is what I was talking about earlier in terms of having like, you know, weird small removal. So you need to make sure you need to either pay a total of 7 to get into the Blue Storm Dragon, or you're going to need to make sure you swing with 3 other Aqua Force followers before you play the Blue Storm Dragon and swing with it before you evolve and able to destroy a follower and then drawing 2 cards. And of course, lastly, we have Storm Rider Basil, which is a 3-cost 2/2 with Storm, but when he comes into play, you return a 1-cost Aqua Force follower to the field to its owner's hand. You may summon an Aqua Force follower that costs 3 or less from your hand. Alright, so with Basil, you're going to be racking up a lot of damage just because on 3, you're going to be returning a 1-cost follower, which is either going to have Rush or Storm, which you have already swung with, and returning it to your hand and keeping it safe so you can play it again. And then you can play a 3-cost or less Aqua Force follower from your hand, which is the Blue Storm Dragon, which if you have the 4th, or this is the 4th attack after the Storm Basil, you will get that free Evo, which is pretty cool. But at the same time, if you're still playing low to the ground, at least that's a total of 5 damage on the board, as long as you're able to, on turn 3, put that 1-cost follower back to your hand. Alright, so looking at the starting amulets for the deck, of course we're able to choose between the basic ones that can give any Vanguard follower +1/+1, but Alfresca Deck Eric is not a bad card to have in your deck as well, just because you're able to give any 1-cost Aqua Force follower Storm, which will definitely help you in getting those 3 Aqua Force follower swings in one turn. Alright, so here are all the triggers that are going to be for the Aqua Force followers deck. So all of them have a main theme of costing 1, so that's very convenient. So any 1-cost follower that you're going to be putting back to your hand with Basil is going to be pretty helpful, especially if you can give them Storm and being able to swing the very same turn. It's just pretty cool as well. So here are all the 1-cost followers that you can potentially put back into your hand, or that can also swing in the very same turn that they're played due to other effects, which is pretty cool. We have the Tier Knight Cypress, which is a Storm follower that you can go ahead and swing. That can be the first card. And then mind you, it has that last word, so when he does die, you can go ahead and get another card and get him back, which is pretty helpful to just go ahead and spend 1 and then being able to have that as your 1-cost swing. That will be the first swing that you have for Aqua Force followers that does no damage, but you can replace the card in your hand. And then of course from the triggers page, but at the same time, this is not a bad 1-cost 1/1 Storm follower that can get this engine started as well. And then the Tier Knight Theo. So this is amazing 1-cost swing just because it's the most value in terms of damage. And then this paired up with other cards that might buff and whatnot is pretty helpful as well, just being the 1-cost 2/1. And if there's another Aqua Force follower, we can also trade into a follower that's probably unengaged and reserved and whatnot to just go ahead and swing him or get rid of him, and then being able to play another 1-cost follower so we can get those 3 Aqua Force follower swings. Alright, and then we have the MVP of 1-drops, I will say. So we have the Tier Knight Valeria. So she's a 1-cost 1/1, you can ride her for 1, but on drive you give this follower +1/+1, Storm and Strike, you select the enemy follower on the field, and if it's the 3rd time an Aqua Force follower in the field has attacked this turn, you'll deal 2 damage to the selected follower. Now mind you, this card has the potential to get out of hand very quickly, as easy as turn 2. So mind you, you have a tier 9 Valeera that will turn into a goblin, but if you manage to hit a crit trigger, that card will turn into a 4/2 very quickly, and imagine taking 4 damage on turn 2. It's a little insane. So if you hit the gas there and you hit the crit trigger, then this card is very crazy and you're taking 4 damage on turn 2. If you do not have the terms of like healing that back, you are now just thinking, okay, well, this deck is very aggressive. But on the bright side, of course, these followers aren't that big, because you can see that their defensive line is less than 2. Even with the tier 9 Valeria upgrade, there isn't a way to make any followers with like bigger defense and like quick timing. So being able to get rid of these cards very easily is just nice. Alright, so we need to get some real value, of course, out of swinging with 3 followers in one turn. So we need to figure out how we're able to recuperate or find some way to get some good value when we're doing the 3 Aquaforce swings outside of the Maelstrom late game Storm plays. So cards like Stormwire Diomedes, which is a rush follower, when he comes into play, select them, follow in field, and then engage it, which will be pretty nice just so we can go ahead and swing it as something, because sometimes our enemies, or our opponents, excuse me, are just going to keep their follower that's like a 5/5 reserved because you have no real way of getting rid of it outside of like not having any spells. So having Diomedes to go ahead and engaging it so you can start swinging into it, and on the fact that Diomedes has the last words of if it's your turn, look at the top 5 cards, and then you may summon up to 2 1-cost Aquaforce followers from among them and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. Which is very helpful because a whole bunch of our 1-drops either have Storm or Rush, or whenever there's another Aquaforce follower on the field, you know, they might do X, and then you can definitely reach those 3 Aquaforce follower swings in one turn. Alright, and next up we have the Marine General of the Restless Tides, Algos, which is a 2-cost 1/3, which is, you know, not going to be in the regular aggressive part of the deck, but it is very helpful for when you do get those 3 Aquaforce swings, you're able to heal 2 and then draw a card, so you're able to recuperate some of that hand loss that you did by playing these cards, unless you use the Storm Rider Diomedes. And the cool thing about the Marine General is that he's able to transform into the Naval Gazer Dragon, which also has 2 drives, so you're able to drive check twice, and then you're able to on-evolve summon a 1-cost Aquaforce follower from your hand to just go ahead and swing for some more damage. Alright, so out of all the other cards, these are the last cards that we're going to be looking at to being able to add cards to our hand or just being able to draw in a way. And that's Light Signals, Penguin Soldier, which is on drive to give the follower +1/+1, and you're able to look at the top card of your deck, reveal it, add it to your hand. If you reveal a 1-cost Aquaforce follower though, you give your leader +2 defense, which is very good in terms of like having tempo heal. And then of course we have the Water General of the Wave-like Spirals, Benedict, which is a 3-cost, which on drive will give him the +1/+1, and you can search your deck for up to 2 1-cost Aquaforce followers with different names and reveal them, and then you add them to your hand. Alright, so like I said before, soldiers, the removal is very scarce. So of course the other cards that we haven't looked at are the Coral Assault, which is a 2-cost 2/2, but on drive you select put the 1-name follower and then deal it 2 damage, and you give this follower +1/+1. And whenever an Aquaforce follower on your field attacks, you can select enemy follower on the field, and if it's the third time an Aquaforce follower on the field has attacked this turn, you'll deal 2 damage to the selected follower. And I'm not gonna lie, soldiers, that is just so lackluster in terms of damage. Like, you're spending 3 play points to get a 3/3 that you can deal 2 damage to something else, and then of course you're going to be able to swing 3 and then have the drive check, which is very helpful of course, but having the requirement of, you know, at least swinging 3 times and then using this card as your evolve card, if you're not like going with tempo to being able to like swing into a total of 5 into something, I feel like that's just a huge neg to have all this requirements into doing like 4 damage. And of course we talked about the Maelstrom. Of course, when this card connects, just being able to get rid of a card and then drawing 2 is just a huge plus. Alright, and lastly we have the Hydro Hurricane Dragon, which is an 8-cost 5/5, which we won't be paying it for 8 unless we're going with like huge tempo and we're in the late game and we just need to play this on 8. Like, there are situations where that happened, but we're optimally not going to want to do that, just because this card is going to cost 2 as long as the 3 Aquaforce followers have swung this turn. And then playing this for 2, you get a 2-cost 5/5, but when it comes into play, select the 2 enemy followers on the field and you destroy them, and for every follower destroyed this way, you deal 1 damage each enemy leader. Which is a cool ability. I will say that this is a nice ability. You get a 2-cost 5/5 that's able to take care of 2 things, but you do have to remember that it is in the terms of like having the combo 3 with having 3 Aquaforce followers swinging in one turn, which sometimes is just a big ask. And mind you, you have to make sure you swing with those 3 followers, and this is the card you're going to commit to by getting rid of 2 followers. So, you know, in that scenario, did you at least plus in some way by returning some cards to your hand or like drawing in a way? So there's lots of ways that you could just neg by just choosing to get rid of cards on your opponent's field by playing the Hydro Hurricane Dragon. All right, so let's get into the tech for the deck. So personally, in my opinion, I think these are all the cards that'll really help out this deck a whole bunch. So we have the 1-cost quick spell Emerald Shield Pascal, which is a just snipe, which is very helpful in the mirror match. And then on fact that you're able to discard an Aqua Force follower and then deal 3 damage to something, and potentially adding another card to your hand that can be a 1-cost Aqua Force follower from the top of your deck and just adding that to your hand. Alrighty, next up we have Maiden of Libra, so it's a 3-cost 3/3 with Ward. So when it's played, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and you put any number from them on the top of your deck in any order, and then put the rest on the bottom in any order. And then she's able to engage herself to draw a card. So I think this is a very good way to really set up your deck, of course, because, you know, we're going to want to hit as many 1-cost followers and stuff like that and triggers. And mind you, if we're going to be hitting twin drives and single drives, if we're going to be doing it in storm timing, I think setting up a crit trigger in 1 turn is just going to be very amazing. And then another card I will say is Chain Attack Sutherland. So with the 3-cost 2/2, you can select a Vanguard follower in your field and you give it +3 attack. You can also engage to bury this card and you can select an enemy follower in the field and deal a damage equal to this follower's attack. Alright, so if we're going to be swinging in with storm damage, why not just spend the extra 3 play points to give it an extra 3 attack? Sometimes that might be the extra 3 damage that you might need to close out a game. Alright, and then lastly we have Powers Converge, so it's a 3-cost spell card, so you can choose one of the following. If there are at least 3 face-up cards in the drive point in your evolve deck, you can choose up to 3 instead by being able to select an enemy follower on the field and then dealing it 4 damage, or selecting a follower in your cemetery, adding it to your hand, or you can give your leader +4 defense. So yeah, that is all the cards that I thought were pretty helpful in this deck in terms of how the deck wanted to be played. I think the deck needs to be played very aggressively, so I think you should really think of like maybe putting in 1 Chain Attack Sutherland in like a lot of your builds, just so you can throw in that extra 3 damage, because, you know, if you have that extra 3 damage, they're going to be looking towards removing that card, and they got to take care of Sutherland if you don't use his engage ability to remove another follower. Alright, so getting into the grade of the deck. So I think the Aqua Force deck is pretty neat. I think it's pretty cool. The one thing I will say is that the hand size really does hurt sometimes, so you really do have to slide in a whole bunch of the cards that'll draw you some cards, and those kind of feel like you're just stalling out turns by only spending like 3 play points, and you're not really getting the full value of swinging with 3 Aqua Force followers, because you're gonna make sure you play those 1-cost. So there's a lot of sequencing going on with this deck. I'm not gonna lie to you, when making this list or this video, I just felt like I was talking in circles talking about the 3 Aqua Force follower swings, because there's like so many networkings into what 1-cost you want to play. Of course, we're going to want to play the storm followers, but there are followers that just have rushed, and then sometimes you might get into awkward positions where your opponent just doesn't have any followers, and it's like, okay, well, I have to just swing face, so I'm going to be looking for all my storm followers. And then there's situations where you might not even get any of your storm followers. And before we get into the grade of things, I want to show everybody a couple sample deck lists that are pretty helpful. Alright, so here is the sample deck list that was on the Shadowverse Evolve webpage, or the home website. This is a good example of a good Aqua Force deck. This isn't super competitive. I said it has almost 3 of everything besides the starter amulet. I think it's a very good way to start off the Aqua Force deck. Alright, and here is a sample deck list that I have created. I know this might seem a little different from every other thing. I'd say move the ratios around. I think this is a pretty decent one. If you want to rock it, I think it has the right ratios for everything. I'd say if you have any success with it, let me know. Or if you would have any tweaks with it, let me know in the comments below too, because we want to make the best Aqua Force deck as possible so players can use it. But this is my simple deck list. You know, it's not going to look anything too crazy, too different. Just have some ratio changes here and some removals there. And there was one card that I did not talk about because it was like really controversial. I think this is a card that is very good just because it can just sit on the field and just like constantly attack. Just very good because it doesn't take any damage for enemy abilities, but it's able to be swung into. So I think this is very good. Alright, so getting back into the grade of the deck. So personally, I would say this deck is a solid B+. So the reason why I do want to give it a B+ is because this deck, is so glass cannon-y. So if you don't hit the right things at the right time, or if you don't hit the right things very early, then you're not going to be in a very good position. Now, you can still play the game and still being able to swing with 3 Aqua Force followers in 1 turn, and that can happen successfully. But if your opponent is able to outvalue you very, in terms of responding to you, I think the deck doesn't feel too good to play. So I think it's a solid B+ deck. But if you do hit the gas and your opponent's not able to respond in those early turns and you're able to get that storm damage off and your triggers connect, I think this deck is an S+. I think it's pretty good. I might be glazing it a little bit by saying S+, but I think it's a very solid deck to be playing. And if you really want to expand with it and you really like the drive check mechanic, excuse me, and really like if your deck kind of really depends on that, then I think this is a good deck to play. And alright soldiers, that is it for the Aqua Force deck. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me that you're watching these videos. And I do want to apologize again that I have not, been on top of getting all these videos out in the same time. I will definitely be doing better in the future as of everything has cleared up now and I'm actually able to post these videos. And just a last bit reminder that I am starting to get back into the frequent of streaming. I'm actually going to be streaming on YouTube a little bit more often. So if you enjoyed, hanging out with me and, want to be a part of the community, join the Discord. I want to get the Discord active again, people talking in there and chilling. I actually really want to talk with a whole bunch of subscribers or a whole bunch of people that also love Shadowverse for the upcoming video that I am going to be making. Alright soldiers, other than that, make sure you're safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do. What I got to do. Just to get you away. What I got to do.